We are joined by Mystic Aquarium. We are so excited to have you today. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for joining us today and talking about, something that we really love talking about are seals and sea lions. There's some really, really interesting animals, marine mammals that we can find in the ocean. But yeah, so I'm very excited to be here. What I was thinking is we can start with a little bit of a presentation that talks about specifically some seal species that we can find in our areas, our local waters. And then as well, we will then be moving out into the exhibits so you guys can actually get to see some of our seals and sea lions. Does that sound good to you guys?
That sounds amazing.
Awesome. All right. So the first species that we're going to be talking about are the gray seals. So this is a local species that we can find around the areas in Connecticut waters, especially in the Long Island Sound. They could potentially reach down to New Jersey, but we can find a lot of these seals along the shores. So they are in pretty good numbers, are the gray seal species. They can get to be pretty big. They can grow to be about 7 to 9 feet long. And they are one of the seal species that we will actually see a lot in our animal rescue clinic. So we get a lot of calls about gray seals, whether it be, they might be found beached, that they need to come in, gain a little bit more weight before they're able to be released, or there might be some entanglement issues with gray seals as well. But they are a very cool species. They eat mainly fish. It can be a little bit misleading with their mouths, but these guys can give a really, really good bite. So they have very sharp teeth that are used for catching fish. And you guys can also see that they have these little ear holes right here. They don't have any external ear flaps, unlike sea lions. So they just have little tiny ear holes. And then if you guys can see all of those whiskers that are on around their snouts and also right above those eyes, those are known as vibrissa. So those are a very, very common thing to have in pinniped animals. So pinnipeds is this big group of marine mammals that include seals, sea lions, and walruses. Awesome. So those are the gray seals. This is what a gray seal pup looks like. So they have this really, really fluffy white coats that we like to call lanugo. So some seal species, they are not born with lanugo, but gray seal species are a type where the pups will be born with this fur. So it's very cute. They're kind of like the picturesque fluffy white seals that you guys can see in photos. But yeah, so this is what they look like when they're first born, and then they'll slowly shed their fur and turn into more of a gray-brown mottling color. Next up is a harp seal. So harp seals can actually be found a little bit further north than around our waters. So they're known as a snow or ice seal. They're used to cold water temperatures and areas that have a lot of snow and ice. So these guys have a pretty cool coloration. They have some like gray and black fur. They have that black fur that mottles down their black, and then the black snout as well around their eyes too. So harp seals, they actually have a pretty interesting behavior that people have noticed through animal rescue. So sometimes we do get some strandings of harp seals off the coast of Connecticut. And when we do, a lot of times we'll notice that that seal had been ingesting a lot of sand or rocks. So why would a seal do this? So what they have been able to determine is because where they are usually found up in areas with all that ice and that snow, when a harp seal isn't feeling too well, typically he'll look around and he's not able to go swimming to look for fish. So he'll try to eat the nearest thing available, and that's usually ice or snow. Now, ice or snow is not harmful for the harp seal. In fact, it might even make him feel a little bit better just to hydrate a bit more. However, when harp seals are found more south, like in Connecticut, we typically don't have a whole lot of ice and snow on our beaches. So if a harp seal strands and he does that behavior where he wants to eat something, but he can't go fishing, he can't go swimming, he might actually try to eat that sand. So that can be something pretty common that you find in stranded harp seals that are around this area, especially younger ones. So they're not as common as gray seals, but they still definitely can be found in this area. This is what that harp seal pup looks like as well. So you guys can see this very, very fluffy lanugo coat, white coloration, very cute. And he also, it blends in really, really well with all that ice and snow. So it kind of acts as a camouflage for young seal pups, can help them survive and hide from predators. All righty. So let me just check in the chat to see if anyone has asked anything. No questions yet. So feel free at any point, guys, to ask any questions that you guys might have. All right, so next up, we have some harbor seals. So this is a very common seal species that we can find in Long Island Sound. And we also will find these guys stranding quite frequently. So they have a really beautiful kind of spotted coloration, a coat pattern. They can be, brown or gray. And they will just have sort of a mixture of spotting and mottling as well. You guys can also see some of the fur differences on them. So when seals go in the water, their fur will actually turn quite a bit darker than when they're up and they're just laying in the sun. So you guys can see that. So harbor seals, on the other hand, when they have pups, their pups typically aren't that really bright white color that we saw with gray seals or with the harp seals. When they have their pups, they're usually kind of like that grayish brown color that the adults will have as well. So when animal rescue, when they are able to find a stranded harbor seal, sometimes they'll notice that that pup will still have the lanugo coat. So that's interesting because that lanugo coat can only be found for neonatal seal pups. So that means that when the seals are still in the womb of their mother, they'll have that lanugo coat, but they'll lose it before they're born. So sometimes if harbor seal pups are born pretty early on, a bit more early on than they should be, they'll have that lanugo coat. So that'll be a red flag for the animal rescue team. If they see a harbor seal pup with the lanugo coat, they'll know that that seal pup was way too young, and they'll take in the pup and raise up the pup until they're able to be released at a better age. So at the aquarium, I've been talking quite a bit about animal rescue. So we do a lot of work with seals in our area, not typically sea lions too much because we actually don't have any native sea lion species up along the Northeast where we are. Sea lion species can be found on the West Coast and also down in South America, but we typically don't have them up here. But we do a lot of work with local seal species because it's really, really important for us to be preserving these populations in order to better understand why might they be stranding or what's going on. So all the data that we collect from seal rescues really goes more into conservation of the animals. Here is a hooded seal. So this is a really, really cool seal species. Similar to the harp seals, these guys can be found more north, closer to the Arctic. So they're used to all that cold and icy water and a lot of snow. So these guys are similar to the size of the gray seals as well. They're very, very big. They can get to be up to 7 to 9 feet long. They weigh quite a bit more than harbor seals. Harbor seals can only get up to be about 5 feet long. And same goes for the harp seals. They're not that big, but hooded seals can be very, very big. And the reason why hooded seals have their name is when they are trying to be territorial and trying to say, where their territory is or fight off other seals, they will actually inflate their nose. It'll look like a balloon. then they're able to ward off other seals. It's pretty cool. Here's a photo of what that inflation looks like. So it really does look like a big balloon that's on the seal's nose. But it's a pretty cool adaptation that they have in order to fight off other seals. So seals are not typically social animals. People will oftentimes find lots of seals on the beach, like this photo of the harbor seals. I think this is a pretty good example. They're not very social, but it may look like they do. It may look like they are social. But the only reason why they all tend to be up on this rock right here is because that's a really nice rock and all of them want to be laying on it and sunning themselves on it. But other than that, they don't really socialize too much. The only time that they'll really socialize or bond with another seal is between a mother and a pup. And even that, it doesn't last very long. So it depends on what kind of seal species it is, but some seal pups only stay with their mother for about a couple of days. Some might end up staying with their mother for a few weeks more or a couple of months. So the sea lions, on the other hand, are very, very social animals. So this is a photo of a California sea lion. So these guys can be found along the West Coast in nice rocky areas. And these are very social animals. So they live in big groups that we call rookeries. So large groups of sea lions, and they're very social. They enjoy playing with each other as well as hunting together. But they are very social animals. So you guys can also see in this photo of the California sea lion, they have those nice long whiskers that are known as vibrissa, similar to the seals. But you guys can also see that these guys have some external ear flaps as well. Like the seals, which we couldn't really see any ear flaps, they just had that little ear hole. The sea lions do have ears for those external ears. Sea lions' diet mainly consists of fish. They are active pursuit predators for fish. So you can find them hunting quite a bit in the ocean. Here are some stellar sea lions. This photo is actually taken in the stellar sea lion exhibit at the aquarium, which we will be going to see in a little bit. Almost like a blondish color, which is pretty cool because in the water, it's more of a darker brown. So stellar sea lions are pretty large species. So let's talk a little bit about the differences. We've gone through seals and sea lions, but let's compare them at the same time. So you guys can see in this top photo, seals will have the ear hole. They don't have those external ears. Sea lions will have that ear with a flap or that external ear. If we were to look at the front flippers, seals, their front flippers have claws on them. Whereas for sea lions, they just have skin on the flippers, and where they do have claws, they're very, very short. So seals can't really walk around. So they have a behavior that we call galumphing. That's when they're kind of flopping around on the beach, and they can't walk around because they don't have a rotating hip bone. Whereas sea lions, they do have that rotating hip bone, and they're allowed to turn it and they can walk on land. For the seals, they don't really bark too loudly. They'll make more of like grunting noises. You guys can see in this photo on the bottom left, that's called a banana pose. That's kind of like a resting behavior for seals. And then for the sea lion on our bottom right, they bark very loudly. They have what we call a yoga pose. Awesome. And then here's a little bit of a chart. This information is just what we were talking about. But I want you guys to look at for all pinnipeds, they're all marine mammals. So they're mammals just like we are. and they live a part of their life in the ocean. So they'll mostly hunt and play in the ocean, but they'll mostly socialize and rest on the beach. They have 4 webbed fins. So they have the 2 front fins and the 2 back fins. They have pretty streamlined shapes that allow them to swim very, very quickly and well in the water. They have an insulating layer of blubber that keeps them nice and warm if they're in colder water. They also have fur. All right, awesome. So that's a little bit of some information about seals and sea lions that I just wanted to go over with you guys before we go out to actually take a look at some of the animals. And then I can walk and talk as we're going over there now. So we can actually start heading over. We'll make our way over there. Oh, awesome. So it looks like we're actually coming up to the stellars during a feeding. So we can take a look at some feeding that's going on right now.
You brush their teeth. You do? Yeah, brushes. It's so cute. You go inside? But you have to serve. No, we have another cookie over there. Oh, you're going to be so smart, right? You will, right? This is weird. What is the name? Stellar sea lion. Oh, biggest sea lion. Oh,
So stellar sea lions, they can regularly grow up to 10 feet long. They can weigh to be over 2,200 pounds. And while the males are only a little bit bigger than the females, they tend to weigh a considerable amount more. So their age range can typically be between 15 to 30 years old.
Where you put them to sleep outside?
Oh yeah, they just leave it under the sky.
Oh, wow, nice. That's so cute.
Yeah.
Good adult. I did train them.
Good. You can actually see one of the husband races is right over there.
Oh, look at that.
You did that one? Good girl. Good.
Oh, yeah.
Good. Good girl.
Oh, do we have a chat right here?
I'm just encouraging people that if they do
Oh,
have
yeah,
questions,
sounds good.
feel free. You can raise your hand.
I know, feel free to ask any questions, guys, about any of the animals. So this is actually pretty interesting. You guys can see that our trainers, we had a trainer up here who was feeding the sea lions, but we also have trainers back there as well. For our stellar sea lions, they typically like to do no contact training. But they'll call for the animals will come up, and each feeding session also acts as somewhat of a training session as well. So as the animals are eating, they're able to, the trainers will ask the animals to perform a certain behavior, and then they'll get fed as a reward. So all the training that happens at Mystic Aquarium is using positive reinforcement. So they know that if they do that behavior, then they'll get a nice reward. So one of the sea lions, or the trainer just asked the sea lion to vocalize, which she did.
I love the way they move. They're so cute.
I know. It's pretty funny.
Do they have a favorite food?
They do. So there are some types of food that are, it all depends on the animal, but some animals have a favorite type of fish that they really love, or they really enjoy, or there's a certain reinforcing behavior that they really, they might prefer as well. Like for the belugas, they often really like a tongue pat. That's a reinforcing behavior. So sometimes, in place of the fish, they'll actually get a tongue pat for doing a certain behavior that they did really well. But it all depends. Every animal has their own preferences, but it's pretty cool because it's all individual as well. And the trainers know that, and they begin to recognize that, so that they can play really well into training. It can better build that relationship between the animal and the trainer as well.
Do their vocalizations like mean different things?
Yes, so there can be different vocalizations that the trainers can request from an animal, but each animal really has their own voice or their own specific vocalization, which is pretty neat. They have a certain behavior, especially with our California sea lions, where they'll ask the California sea lions to vocalize, and it's really interesting to see all those different vocalizations within the animals. So they really do each have their own voice.
They do put them in captivity. That's what humans get from making them.
Well, they can't survive on their own.
Oh, we have a question in the chat. Were these
Oh, yeah,
animals either injured or sick at one time?
Let's see. Yes. So take, for example, Astro's story, which I think he's just chilling right there in the water there. Yeah, so Astro's story was when he was really, really young, he was taken in because he was feeling a little bit sick, but he was rehabilitated and he was released back into the wild. But there were situations that happened after that where Astro, he kept on coming back into more of the vicinity of where people were living. He actually partook in a children's or school's walkathon. And then, the researchers were eventually like, okay, well, he doesn't, he can't stay in the wild because he's too acclimated to people at that point. So he was taken in at that point. The other sea lions have come from other facilities, but you will see with a lot of the animals here, for our seals especially, they were at one point wild, but they were rescued because they were either sick or injured. And our ultimate goal for every time we rehabilitate an animal is to release that animal. However, there are certain circumstances, like say if a seal is missing part of their flipper, or they're missing an eye, or one of our seals actually she'll have seizures, so she couldn't be released into the wild. But there are certain medical conditions that will deem an animal non-releasable. So yes, so some of the animals here were once living in the wild, and because of their medical issues, they couldn't be released, whereas other animals actually came from other facilities or other organizations that had them already, or they were born in captivity, so they couldn't be released then. Another question. Can you tell when an animal is homesick for the wild? That's a very good question, my friend. So typically, because the animals here, they're getting food every day, they're getting medical care, they're getting enrichment. We like to think that, they're well cared for, but that's another thing when we run into for animals, you know, when we're saying that they're homesick, they are animals. They can't really verbally tell us that they're homesick. And they can't, you know, display those feelings to us because they might not have those feelings. It can be attributing characteristics that we can feel as people towards animals, which we do have to be careful when we're doing that, because these guys, they're not humans, so they don't really feel the same way that we do, but they're getting the best health care that they can be getting, and they're getting fed every day, and they're able to rest very, very well. So, you know, they have a pretty good life here, I think. I'm sure it's nice that, you know, they're not being preyed on by any predators such as sharks or orcas as well. That could be a plus for them. But yeah, very good questions, guys. All right, so next up, we're going to be making our way over to the seals. So we actually do have a pseudo sea lion in with the seals. They're known as the fur seal, but they are actually true sea lions. When they were first identified, there wasn't really a difference between seals and sea lions back then. But now that we've been able to do more research in on the animals, we've been able to realize that they are actually sea lions. So this is what the fur seal looks like. He's actually a true sea lion. You guys can see that he has those external ear flaps, and he also has rotating hip bones that he can walk on all fours with. You guys can see all these guys swimming around down here. There's a fur seal right there. So we did actually get a new fur seal at Mystic Aquarium. Her name is Luna. And she has a really cool silver marking on her chest. So she's swimming around right over there. There's Adak, he's swimming right there. You guys can see that really long vibrissa that they have, the very long whiskers on their face. So this is when I was speaking about one of our fur seals here, Yura. She actually is one of the seals that she'll have seizures sometimes, so she's on medication for that. But it's kind of situations like that where you wouldn't want that specific animal to be in the wild, just because for medical reasons they wouldn't survive out in the wild. So she has a nice home at Mystic Aquarium here. So the fur seals are very active today. They're usually just chilling on the rocks. You guys have any questions about our seals here? We have more sea lions in the seals habitat right now, but there's one of our seals back there.
The answer, oh, sorry. This
yeah,
might
yeah.
be different for between the seals and the sea lions, but like, are they social animals?
Yes, so the sea lions are very social animals. Yeah, so they're used to living in very crowded, very populated groups called rookeries. So these guys spend a good deal of their lives socializing because together. Seals, on the other hand, they're not too social. You can find them on the same beach, but they're usually a good distance apart from each other. Here are seals over there. But these guys, they get along pretty well. You guys can see, you know, the sea lions, which are known as the fur seals. They're true sea lions. These guys have been swimming around the entire time I've been showing the video of just like, you know, interacting with each other and playing with each other and chasing each other around. But you don't really get that behavior with the seals. The seals are just kind of swimming around, minding their own business. But our sea lions, absolutely.
And someone in our Q&A asked, how long are they able to be in the water?
How long can they be in the water? That's a good question. So it all depends on the species. Some pinnipeds can only be in the water for about, you know, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whereas some can stay in the water for up to 2 hours. Those are more of our deep diving seals.
And I saw they were like lining up behind each other. Is that a way that they play or that they communicate with each other?
Sorry, what was that? I couldn't hear you. I had some people walking by.
Yeah, so I saw when you first showed them to us that they were like lining up behind each other's tails. Is that a way that they play or that they communicate with each other?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're interacting with each other. Absolutely. You guys can even see the sea, like the fur seals over there, the sea lions. They're interacting, but yeah, absolutely. They'll just kind of swim along with each other a lot.
Awesome.
Awesome. Do we have another? Right. All right, perfect. So we are gonna go to our last stop at the California Sea Lions. So we'll make our way over there real quick. And then if you guys have any questions, I can kind of answer as I'm walking along.
Oh, we have a question in the chat. Do any reproduce while in the aquarium?
Yeah, good question. So yes, there are some species or some of the animals here that are on permit so that we are allowed to actually have them reproduce with each other. But there are some animals that are not on permit to reproduce. So it all depends what the permitting is. But yes and no. So yes, some of the animals, if they were to reproduce, they would be allowed to, whereas some of the animals are not. So this all plays into what we call the species survival plan. So primarily with our African penguins, there are many different zoos and aquariums that are a part of the species survival plan. And the whole goal of it is just to keep up genetic diversity to make sure, you know, that the animals that are in zoos and aquariums are very healthy animals. So we particularly partake in the species survival plan with our African penguins, but not too much with the belugas, not too much with the seals or sea lions. So every couple of years, our penguins will have clutches. Like I believe it was coming up on 2 years ago was the last clutch of eggs that the penguins had. We actually had 3 eggs hatched at the aquarium. 2 were brother and sister, and the other one was another male. All right, so we're on the main floor of the aquarium now, walking to the California Sea Lions. So we can get to see a very, very cool underwater viewing of the California Sea Lions. And it's right before the show. So we should be good with them still in the water. They should be still swimming around, so let's see. Oh, perfect. So it's pretty dark in there right now, so we should still be able to see them. It's pretty dark because the show is about to start soon, but you guys can see them swimming very, very well in the water. we talked about it a little bit earlier, but they have a nice layer of blubber that kind of streamlines their bodies. So they are able to, they get a good insulating layer of blubber to keep them nice and warm, but it also acts to give them a nice torpedo shape that allows them to glide very smoothly in the water. And they can swim pretty fast. I believe it's up to 25 miles an hour with the California sea lions they can swim.
And how deep can they swim?
They can swim to pretty deep depths. So they wouldn't want to go too deep, but to catch fish and whatnot, you know, it could be up from super shallow water to maybe depths around 100 feet, even deeper than that.
Oh,
So
wow.
their bodies are specifically designed, unlike ours. We can't dive to certain depths because our ribs, like our body would the pressure would get to us a little bit more. But seals and sea lions, they actually have what we call collapsible ribs. So when they dive, their ribs can kind of get pressurized, but still remain good and in function. So they're used to the pressure and they're used to the water. So they're really well designed. If they needed to, they could swim to go down pretty deep. All right, and then perfect timing. It looks like the sea lions just went up for the start of the show, and we're just about ending. So do you guys have any last questions about any of the animals that you guys saw today or learned about? And take the last couple of minutes to answer anything.
Anyone have any last questions? Looks like we're good.
All right, awesome. That sounds good. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today and talking and learning about pinnipeds. They're a really cool group of animal. And there's a lot of things that we can do to keep them safe and conserve them in the wild. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you guys, and thank you guys for the great questions. It's always very fun to talk about these animals. But yeah, thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.